Hello, everyone. So welcome, everybody. And a special welcome to the students from the United States International University in Kenya. And now, it is my honor and great pleasure to introduce Kimberly Juanita Brown at today's Fellows Colloquium here at the Du Bois Research Institute at the Hutchins Center. She is Associate Professor of English and Creative Writing at Dartmouth College, where she has also been the co-director of the Consortium of Studies in Race, Migration, and Sexuality. An extraordinarily accomplished public intellectual and interdisciplinary scholar of modern American literature and visual culture, her research engages the sight of the visual as a way to negotiate the parameters of race, gender, and belonging. Well known for her leadership and as an energetic builder of programs, in 2012, Brown founded the Darkroom Race and Visual Cultural Studies Seminar. She continues to convene this highly acclaimed working group of women of color whose work gathers at the intersection of critical race theory and visual cultural studies. She is also the author of the book, The Repeating Body, Slavery's Visual Resonance in the Contemporary. It's published by Duke University Press. It was published a few years ago, and it explores slavery's profound ocular construction and the presence and absence of seeing in relation to the plantation space. It remains a significant and influential study in the fields of visual and Black cultural studies. Professor Brown is currently at work on 2 books, Morta Vivum, Photography and the Politics of the Visual and Black Elegies. Those are 2 books. The first examines the relationship between photography and anti-Blackness, while Black Elegies explores the myriad ways Black diasporic subjects mourn losses that are rarely acknowledged. So now we look forward to hearing more about Black Elegies. Please welcome Kimberly Juanita Brown.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? So I want to start my talk by thanking you all for being here today as I work through the contours of this book project. I want to thank my fellow Hutchins fellows. It's been wonderful hearing your talks and getting to know your work while also getting to know you better. Thank you to Henry Louis Gates for your vision, Abby Wolf and the incomparable Krishna Lewis for facilitating the magic that is this seminar. I also want to thank Johnny and Fox, our technological geniuses, because they will be necessary today. Nothing's moving. It's broken. I've already messed it up. Oh, thank you. Okay. We see a young man on the edge of an orange fishing boat, casual, playful, and carefree. We hear the sound of the ocean as his auditory accompaniment, and this feels correct. We watch as he moves with the ocean waves, sometimes rising to stand on the edge of the boat, sometimes toppling over into the water. When he falls, he does so playfully, rebounding quickly to return to the top of the boat. He is long and lean, with sun-blessed dark brown skin. His hair is an auburn, blonde, brown mix that tells you that he's familiar with the warm outdoors. Ashes is a fisherman from Grenada, making his living on the water. He is 25 years old in the film. He will never be older than this. Steve McQueen's short film, Ashes, is a 2-channel video installation that sways between 2 temporal spaces, 2002 and 2015, in order to memorialize a life cut short. Ashes finds a stash of drugs on the beach one day and he thinks his future is secure. The drug dealers whose drugs it is track him down. He returns the drugs to them. They kill him anyway. McQueen finds out about Ashes' murder, and so this takes place about 2 months after the video. He finds out about the murder and provides Ashes with a burial plot and a tomb. The second side of the triptych of the film takes place in the cemetery, where the tomb is constructed that will hold Ashes' remains. The young man's friends are in the process of that construction in the film. And what constitutes an accidental elegy? McQueen travels to Grenada in 2002 with the intention of filming Carib's Leap, which chronicles the mass suicide event in the 17th century where 40 Caribs leapt into the sea, escaping French troops. While scouting locations for Carib's Leap, McQueen takes a significant amount of B-roll, including images of Ashes in his comfortable surroundings. On grainy Super 8 film, we get to see Ashes in all of his youthful vitality. He is a compelling cinematic figure, and he knows it. On the water, or in it, climbing his way back out, Ashes commands the viewer's attention. His laughter is our laughter, his joy, our joy. We see him then in the full embodiment of the life that he has before him. The film allows us to linger there, in the center of that life. Debuting at the 2015 Venice Biennale, Ashes traverses themes of movement, migration, colonization, haunted histories, and diasporic connection to underscore the intimacy between the viewer and the subject. It is a film steeped in the emotive extension of sound, waves crashing against the boat, the clanging of tools, the sounds of goats and dogs in the distance, the narrative memory of a friend now gone. I'm a scholar of the still image. At my center, at my core, this is who I am. Each time I've been invested in film or cinema, it has been because the film reminds me of photography, retains something of its nature, its relationship with stillness. With Ashes, it is the opposite. Ashes, the still image. So when you go to see the film, I saw it at the ICA Boston, you get film posters. That's one side, and then the other side. So with Ashes, it's the opposite. Ashes, the still image, seems as though it is somehow moving, swaying back and forth with the rhythm of his body and the rhythm of the ocean. If it were a song, it might be a lullaby, softly intoning and imploring one to sleep. There is something soothing about this scene, something that restores a sense of calm amidst a chaotic world. In Lucille Clifton's poem, Blessing the Boats, she writes, "May the tide that is entering even now, the lip of our understanding, carry you out beyond the face of fear. May you kiss the wind and turn from it, certain that it will love your back. May you open your eyes to water, water waving forever, and may you in your innocence sail through this to that." Ronald Reagan's "Not in Our Backyard" declaration preceded a military invasion of Grenada in 1983. This part of the story is history, Dion Brand writes in A Map to the Door of No Return. The coup took place, the Americans invaded. That was the end of the socialist path in Grenada and the English-speaking Caribbean. McQueen's juxtaposition of ashes in life and his resting place after death has the effect of sonically clashing lullaby against a cacophony of movement, invasion, rupture, turmoil. Black elegies like this are suffused with memorial traces that are geographical, historical, juridical, and cultural. This gives them a more expansive reach, and I'm interested in the arc of this production. Within a genre of poetry dedicated to addressing the depth and the breadth of loss, the elegy has a long and vibrant history, particularly in the United States. Black elegies, though, have a less secure space in American literature. In a problematic racial canon that often takes mourning as a white presentation, elegies are often bereft of Black poets, but full of a poetics of Black mourning. I want to attend to these moments where not even our grief is our own. For instance, the cover image of Max Cavitch's book, American Elegy, The Poetry of Mourning from the Puritans to Whitman, features a photograph of African-American twin boys, one of whom is dead. In the visual dissonance of the cover image, we can see a process of Black elegiac refusal at work. As a book of literary criticism that has almost no mention of Black grief, utilizes an image of palpable Black loss as its central visual symbol. What is there to understand in the refusal to acknowledge Black grief? My book project considers the expansive range of cultural productions that move in sight, sound, and touch, like sorrow songs with double meanings. I am purposely resisting the desire to encapsulate Black mourning processes around Sigmund Freud's important essay, Mourning and Melancholia, since his meditation on the contours of grief cannot be easily grafted onto Black diasporic subjects, whose profound losses precede Freud's intervention by 200 years and continue still. I'm asking different questions for this book project, the most important of which is, how do you mourn those you're not supposed to see? Black elegies alter the landscape of grief and its concomitant release wherever they are found. These are sensorial experiences, and they include music, dance, craft work, as well as photographs and film. In the United States, Black elegies must often evade clean transparency, cloaked in something other than explicit mourning. This is due to the history of slavery, imperialism, racial subjugation, and acts of public violence that Black subjects have and continue to experience in the diaspora. And they constitute an archive bound by loss. Okay, let's see if this works. We're gonna watch this whole film. It's 5.5 minutes. It's 13 seconds before you see Alice Smith in Khalil Joseph's short film, Black Mary. You hear her voice 2 seconds before you see her. It's haunting, this entrance into the film by Smith, who is singer, spirit, and muse. Black Mary, commissioned by the Tate Museum, is an ode to the photographic oeuvre of Roy DeCarava and merges sound with deeply saturated images of Black subjectivity. Smith is the focal point, the center of the text. It is her voice that you follow. It is her world that you enter. She sings a rendition of I Put a Spell on You, and you are spellbound. The tone of the song betrays its lyrics, or maybe it doesn't. Made famous first by Screamin' Jay Hawkins and Nina Simone, Smith's remake is unlike any other that exists. It possesses all of the soul and the edge of other performances, but is cognizant of the plead, the tortured, possessive quest. Instead, the song winds like a road, curved and smooth, but devoid of destination. Blackness is the destination, and the mood is full of collective grief. It is an insistent wail that goes on for 6.5 minutes. That's the original recording of the song. It's 6.5 minutes long. And I know this because I listened to it on a flight from Miami to Toronto in 2019, the whole way. The tempo is slowed as Smith's 4-octave vocal range glides in and out. A haunting, a love story, a prayer, a wail, an elegy. She is sparing with the lyrics, repeating words like mine and I love you, until they are disaggregated from the form they once held and return to their place of origin. Joseph's use of Smith as a focal point in Black Mary is explained in this quote from a conversation that the artist had with Arthur Jafa. Joseph says, I have a pure obsession with Alice Smith. A lot of people do. When she sings, especially live, she goes places very few people I've ever seen live can create. There's a lot of pain and soul in her songs. It's formed by everything that's happened in the last 400 years or so, a kind of cry. It feels like a cry. To represent 400 years of pain, a voice that sounds like a cry, is to expand the framework of mourning so that it represents the living and the dead, to quote Morrison. The slow-moving mix of imagery is punctuated by sound, but anchored by Smith's voice. Hilton Als writes of Khalil Joseph, a master of sound, he allows the dialogue and the music in his movies to drop out and then return at unexpected moments, creating a sometimes heart-stopping juxtaposition between what we hear and what we see. It's as if Joseph's visual world were a vinyl record, complete with scratches that make the needle skip, thereby changing the flow of things. Joseph's attentiveness to the vicissitudes of grief is evident in all of his films, which have a mellow, haunting quality to them, like this. And here I'll just say, if you haven't seen the video, you should. But Joseph said that he wasn't quite sure what to do with the video. His father had just passed, and he was really trying to figure out what to do with storyboard P's section. So in this section, the figure is shot, and he falls, he dies, and then rises up. And this is that section. Black Mary is an engagement with our very present moment of blackness, of sight, sound, and of mourning. Joseph has said that the title is to represent Black Mary as a protective force against police violence. From the enclosure of interior space, Smith sings while swaying back and forth, captured alone or among others. Joseph's gaze lingers long and lovingly over the subjects in the film, guided by Smith's musical performance. As quiet as it is thunderous, the mourning properties of Black Mary hover and drift. They are on streets, inside homes, and on the faces of Black subjects that Joseph wants you to see, to hear, and to feel. And just in case this is your introduction to Roy Carava's photography, you are welcome. The final section of Barry Jenkins' 2016 film Moonlight is an addition that does not exist in Terrell Alvin McCraney's play, In Moonlight, Black Boys Look Blue. In an interview, Jenkins states, "The end point of the film is not the end point of the original piece. McCraney stopped writing at the point where Chiron is making the decision to drive back to Miami to see Kevin, so I kept going. This decision to keep going offers the viewer not just a temporal extension of Kevin and Chiron's story, but also an expansively resplendent coupling of haptic regard, looks that touch, heighten, hold, anticipate, and linger. From the initial shot of Chiron, or Black as he is known, played by Trevante Rhodes, driving with patient purpose in the direction of Kevin, played by Andre Holland, to the closing scene with the two men tenderly enveloped, Chiron's head gently placed on Kevin's shoulder. The movement is mesmerizingly slow, and we experience the culmination of loss, longing, vulnerability, desire, and anticipation in the final 29 minutes of the film. Gold flickers on blue where sun meets sea. Jenkins' award-winning film is told in 3 acts, each representing a stage of the protagonist's progression from childhood to adulthood. Act 1 is titled Little, Act 2, Chiron, and the final act is titled Black. We are to follow Chiron through the labyrinth of subjectivities he experiences, from tortured child to guarded teenager, and finally hardened adult, with all of the complexities of sexual discovery mixed in along the way. In what feels akin to a collective nostalgic release, the film closes with the blue black of Little, played by Alex R. Hibbert, against a darkening sky, the sky against his dark skin. And we exhale. He looks forward, he looks back. The quest is now in our hands. In a film that shimmers, immersed in color and tone, music registers as a sonic counterpoint. Touch, then, rounds out a purely sensorial experience that Moonlight illuminates. I'm interested in Moonlight's hapticality, particularly as it mediates the space between looking and longing for Chiron and for Kevin. Within this, we have the measure of the mark of queer desire, the fragile recognition of Black interiority, and the force of cinema's still life. There is power in looking, Bell Hooks writes. Power, release, recognition, affinity, freedom, affection. All this and more is set against a blue Kevin and a gold Chiron background, framing the gaze in its expectant response in a cadence that flows like water on the Atlantic. My interest in Moonlight as a study in stillness is twofold. It assists in a photographic endeavor of Black study, still life, but with a photographic trace instead of a painterly one, and stillness as sonic practice, where the body holds and allows sound to fill the space, to saturate it with intention, somewhere between Tina Camp's thinginess articulation in listening to images and Roy Carava's meditations in The Sound I Saw. To this, I'd like to add haptic regard, or the look that touches. I'm interested in how Black regard functions when the white gaze is not a part of the consideration. If we, as Jenkins insists, keep going, what might there be for us to see? In the triptych display of Chiron's progressive evolution from Little to Chiron to Black, Kevin is the center of his longing and part of the mechanistic production of loss. Through each of his stages, Chiron is one of few words, making his careful, slow gestures part of the nuanced offering he shares with those in his very small circle. The film opens with Mahershala Ali in an Academy Award-winning role as Juan, coaxing Little from his hiding place where he has run to escape bullies. Juan feeds Little, counsels him, and when the child is ready, he brings him home to his mother. The transformation from stranger to mentor and father figure is encapsulated in the first part of the film, but hovers everywhere after, since Juan is deceased in the following two sections of the film. This means that the one man in his life, consistent with tenderness and safety, exists in Little's early memory. The rest is longing and grief unfolding over the film's temporal framework. We get a sense of Chiron's grief in the gestural motions of a trauma-infused recovery and the nuance of his corporeality. So there's a moment where Juan's girlfriend, Teresa, who's played by Janelle Monáe, is making a comparison. She says to Chiron, she says, "You and Juan are just the same." And she thinks that he will find this comforting and light. And he reacts as if he has been punched. You know, like it's still too soon. And at this point, this is the second part of the film, too soon for him to actually lightheartedly speak about Juan. Kevin occupies space in all three sections of the film's narrative arc, though intimacy and absence dominate the second section, where Chiron experiences desire, vulnerability, and sexual awakening alongside violence and rejection. Michael Bois Gillespie writes, "Moonlight conjures Black becoming through the accented lens of survivors, Black masculinities, and queer desires. This becoming is both a looking at and a looking through, a mirroring apparatus that sutures one to another in the interactive atmosphere of human engagement. I see you, I hear you, I feel you." Losses are multiple for Chiron, from the haunting absence of parental neglect to the aggressive and sustained bullying he receives at school. By Act 2, in what facilitates a break between them, Kevin's physical attack on Chiron sets his path forward through the violence of touch, marking the teenager with both gestures of haptic regard in equal measure. The kiss, the punch. As we see later, Black is held together by very few threads, and by the film's end, he is coiled so tightly that the last 20 minutes of the film hold the viewer in a suspended state of anticipation. In the extensive exchange of glances and gazes, Kevin's intentional hold on Chiron is one part flirtation and two parts curiosity. His body moves openly and freely. He is a book imaginatively displayed for the right group of readers. Importantly, Kevin endears the viewer with the comfort he has with himself. It's a softened counterpoint to Chiron, or Black, who appears almost as a secret made flesh in the diner, hovering in quiet and resting time, negotiating the space between longing and release. Kevin's gestures are an offering, as if he's been waiting forever, as if he's been waiting a day. But it is Chiron, right at this moment, who's worthy of an extended gaze. In the temporal demarcation of their reunion, what is the measure of queer desire and how is it encased? Now the character has to finally make a choice, Jenkins states. Now Chiron has to sit there opposite someone who's actually allowing him the space. In the scene that keeps going, we have a close reading of what Gillespie calls textured beauty and Blackness. Jenkins allows this textured beauty and Blackness to envelop the filmic space as part of the atmosphere of engagement that saturates as it relinquishes control. Rebecca Hall's filmic adaptation of Nella Larsen's 1929 novel Passing also traverses the space between saturation and control for Irene Redfield and her childhood friend Claire Kendry. The film beautifully captures much of the sexual tension imbued in the novel as passing, as metaphor, opens a series of transgressions for two Black cosmopolitan women who find themselves betwixt and between America's peculiar one-drop color line barrier. Claire passes for white in this world, and Irene, for the most part, does not. In the lush landscape of the film's framing, Irene's quest to move through Claire manifests itself upon their first encounter after so many years apart. Claire is looking and Irene is glancing. Claire holds her gaze until Irene can no longer look away. Her body, the poise, the deep breathing, the look that does not stop looking. James Elkins writes, "In life, a gaze challenges, it inquires, it takes pleasure, and it asks for a response. And so a dance of call and response is an invitation between two people who know the danger and look anyway." Both Passing and Moonlight possess configurations of analog photography, and in this, they are drawing on the aesthetic referral of photography's haptic materiality. If a photograph's frequencies are a potential route to a different kind of knowledge, Michelle Pearson Clark writes, a knowledge generated by feeling, then perhaps the rough texture, the thinginess of an analog photograph of Blackness produces an intensity of vibrations to which we can more easily attune. This ability to attune is accentuated by both motion and stillness, and for Moonlight, a study in the gravitational pull that is imbricated by longing as loss, longing as release.
The only one. I haven't really touched anyone since.
Hard but soft, closed yet open, fixed and malleable. Chiron says the words he's been holding on to like a secret to the only person it matters that he tell. Kevin's tender recognition is an enclosure that fills itself with the dimensions of complex personhood rendered with care. The journey from denial to desire is an ocean, an abyss, sun, sea, river, mountain. A constant question that circulates around this book project is, where does the grief go? And the answer is everywhere. It spills out of photographs and modulates music. It hovers in the tenor and tone of cinematic performances. It resides in the body like an inspired concept waiting for its articulation. Grief is an ocean. It is an abyss. To quote Toni Morrison, it has no beginning, no end. just circles and circles of sorrow. And the loss is tectonic, covering the surface of the earth while moving, shifting, sliding, and expanding. From sorrow songs, wood carvings, and deeply meditative spiritual sermons to essays, photography, music, and film, Black subjects have mourned what was lost, even when not recognizable as loss. Like the visage of a young man facing a future far in the distance he will never approach, there is the hope that the wind will love his back and that he will sail from this to that. Thank you.
Wow, that was wonderful, so deeply moving.
Thank you.
Thank you. How do you, I'll repeat that. That was beautiful, wonderful,
Thank you.
deep, so deeply moving. The African American literary tradition formally begins in elegy with Phyllis Wheatley.
And stays there.
And what?
And stays there. Consistently stays there.
Oh, yes,
Like,
I'm sorry. So where do you put, was Wheatley writing Black elegies?
Wheatley was writing elegies, so she is actually in Max Cavish's book, and she's the only Black poet in the book. Most of the poems that are in there are about white people that she knows who have passed.
Right.
But she is, we know that she is. So I started this project by thinking about, I couldn't think of a single poet who doesn't write elegies, who's Black.
Right.
So when I went to sort of explore and expand on American elegies in particular, only Michael Harper was solidly in place. Occasionally other people are in and out. Harper is a consistent poet. Other than that, no. As if the canon had room for only one Black poet who's writing about
Sure.
loss.
Have you looked at the Black periodical literature yet?
No.
Well, it's indexed, the Black newspapers.
Okay, hold on.
And it's called the Black Periodical Literature Project. The Black Periodical Literature Project, edited by me. And, you know, we did it so long ago, it was on microfiche, and the index is on a CD-ROM, but I think they've upgraded the technology.
Oh,
But we
nice.
found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of poems in Black newspapers, right? Because the New York Times was focusing on Black
Yeah.
people, or the New Yorker. And this is
Yeah.
going back to Freedom's Journal in 1827. If you drop me a note, if you have a hard time finding it,
Yeah.
just drop me a note, and I'll connect you to Hollis Robbins. Do you know her work?
I don't.
Hollis writes about the Black sonnet, and is all over the Black elegy. She's a dean at the University of Utah, and she and I have done a couple projects together. And she is just the poet's critic. You will love her, and she will love you.
Great.
She'll be a great resource for you.
Excellent.
So Black people have had so much about which to be elegiac. Is there a difference between Black forms of elegy and non-Black forms of elegy? Is there, in other words, an aesthetics of Black elegy, and do Black elegies fall then into different subcategories? You know, is there a typology? I just want to know where you're going, where you're going with this. Think about it.
That's a good question. Okay, so what I decided about a year ago is because I was just kept interacting with representations that I read as elegies, right? But aren't proper elegies. So, for instance, is Alvin Ailey's Revelations an elegy? I say yes. So I've decided if it feels like it to me, then I'm just gonna go. You know, like.
That's the only way to go.
Right?
I mean, if you got tenure, you paid your dues.
That's true. This is not a tenure book. So, so it is a different conversation, but I have been like, so, you know, I see capoeira, for instance, and I go, well, that's an elegy, but is it?
It is to you. If you
It is,
define that
it
way.
is, it is for me.
Definition.
So I'm also looking for places where, so for instance, Alice Smith, I just, you know, I heard the song and I was like, oh, this is something different, you know. And in a conversation that I had with her much later, she said she recorded that version of I Put a Spell on You the day after her grandmother's funeral.
Oh, wow.
And when she performs in concert, she says, essentially, her grandmother enters every time she sings that particular song. Well, that's what I think I was hearing, without knowing it. So I've just decided I am much more interested in, I think I said this before, like I want to work my way back to poetry because everything is in poetry for me, in Black poetry.
Sure.
So I want to see where else it exists, right?
What, how about Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
The Black music's full of elegy.
Of course. It's like the one place that I think, for this country in particular, music is the only place where Black people can be angry, afraid, fearful, mournful, grief-stricken, and it's allowed.
And in love.
And love.
And in love and in heat and in passion.
Exactly. All of it. Like everything can exist there. So really, this project begins by thinking about sorrow songs, which I keep returning to. Thinking about how they occupy space and thinking about what we get out of them and thinking about how much work sorrow songs have to do to still be here. And they're just so deeply embedded with loss.
Right, it's great. Questions, comments?
David.
Yes. Thank you for that presentation. That was amazing. Like Skip just said, Black music is a place where when I think about elegies, I think about specifically in hip hop. Mm-hmm. So many of my favorite rappers growing up, there's songs that they did where they were lamenting the dead, whether it's their mother, their homies that they lost.
When they were about to kill somebody.
Or when they were about to kill. I don't know about that one, but yeah. That's a different type of song when they brag on who they gonna go.
It's an elegy in advance.
There you go. So I think about it like, I'm from New Orleans, so I think about Master P and No Limit Records. That's the record label that he founded. So he has a song called I Miss My Homies, right? And recently they just did a No Limit reunion tour, like a 25-year anniversary to where all the original artists came together. They did big arenas around the country. And it was amazing. I went to the show in Atlanta because I know all these guys, and I'm watching the crowd reaction to all of the songs throughout the night, right? And there's all these songs, like Skip said, about, who you gonna kill, who you gonna shoot, about all the dope you sold, about turning up in the club, make them say, But when he played I Miss My Homies, it was like the Black Negro spiritual had come on, and everyone in unison, like the whole mood, you know how you said, who was that you said? That feels like their grandmother enters them.
Alice Smith.
Alice Smith, yes. So that's exactly how I felt. Like the whole mood in the State Farm Arena just changed, Yeah. And the day after my grandmother's funeral, this was 2 years ago, I decided to write a song too because that was the first time I lost a family member that close. And I have the same exact experience every time I perform this song. It's called My Favorite Girl. So I think the way you articulated that just hit home with me, is that you can feel a presence. I saw it visually at the concert, and I feel it every time I perform this song. So thank you for that articulation.
That's so great.
And you will be performing all this for us at some point.
100%.
Next week,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, we're going to book the basketball stadium and pack it out.
We can raise it.
Thank you for that.
Did you want to comment on that?
Well, so what I want to say is that the two sections I presented today, I moved in the direction of fear. I know nothing about music, and I know nothing about haptic regard, but I know a lot about sight, so I left that out. I will be calling on my fellow Hutchins fellows who know more about music and
But
sound.
you know what you like.
I know what I like, yeah, definitely. But apparently that's not like a thing you can just do. Like, this is what I'm finding out.
What? What you like is what we all do.
That's what
We
I'm,
just find a name to justify it.
that's what I'm going for.
So I just wanted to say thank you for this. I had to stop myself from almost giving you a standing ovation. I felt myself literally, I'm not saying that to be sycophantic. It was really terrific. I have a couple of different questions or points. So the first, I'm interested in some of the moves that you're making in the talk. So the first is the Max Cavich thing, and I'm wondering if you can elaborate a little bit more on that critique and where that fits, and that was the sort of brave and bold and necessary move. The second is the sort of within that move, like your move to queer desire and your absolutely evocative, brilliant formulation that looks, that touch, and this connection between those two films. It was so palpable. I just would love to hear you more, to think about that a little bit more and hear more about what you had to say. And then the ocean, because you kind of bring that up at the end, so it connects with the first piece and then the other piece of Moonlight. Yeah. So I just, anyway, just really, I mean, honestly, it was really brilliant. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I came across the Cavich, this is when I was like, oh, let's just find out what poetic elegies are. And I found that book and couldn't stop looking at the cover, trying to figure out what I was looking at. Then I finally got the actual copy. I had it on Kindle. I got the actual copy. I saw that the photograph is called Black Twins, if I'm not mistaken. And it's in an archive, so that's another part of the project, I believe, is Black people being located in all of these archives that are creepily harmful. So this is an archive you can't, you can purchase photographs, and a lot of them are a lot of lynching photographs, a lot of really difficult images. You can purchase them, but you cannot go see them. It's an archive in New York. And so I thought about that as well. Like, so not even having access to the actual harm that's taking place that looks so much like you. And then I thought, yeah, this is what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about elegies. Because there's something, and I'm going to speak specifically about this country right now, there's something in this country that will not allow Black people to move beyond or outside of harm, constant harm, and then won't recognize the harm that's refuses to recognize the harm that's taking place, which is, in my argument, why elegies are like dripping from everywhere. Black elegies drip from everywhere. That's where the water comes in, because it joins my first project, Representations of Slavery. And then what I'm thinking about now is, so for myself, I will speak for myself, I see a body of water, I am immediately compelled, and then I'm kind of like creeped out. I just keep thinking about the Middle Passage. I can't sit there and just be comfortable, even though I love bodies of water and I love being around bodies of water, but it's never without that other kind of heavy, heavy interaction. So, and then I can skip to the third section. The book is structured, sight, sound, touch. Touch is going to be mostly, not exclusively, but mostly queer desire, and where it's located in the contemporary moment that allows it to be fully present and allows the air to breathe there. So I'm interested in, so I'm reading Moonlight along with Audre Lorde's Zami. These are texts about touch and about the need for touch and about the ways that Black people have to navigate space as if they don't want, need, or deserve this very basic thing. So I'm trying to stitch them all together. I've decided, just like I've decided if it feels like an elegy, I'm just going to go forward and argue that it is. Part of the argument is about locating those spaces that are not the usual suspects for this kind of project. I think it can't be. Yeah.
Thank you so much for a wonderful meditation and reflection. I was really just interested, I mean, you start with water and, of course, Middle Passage. I'm wondering about the extent to which some of the work might be taken for granted, the door of no return, in the sense that a lot of Black funerary practices are not coming out of a vacuum. They're coming from somewhere. And I mean, even just, if I'm on Twitter, for example, and I'm seeing Black funeral practices, you're seeing many of the similarities. There are a lot of things about going to a Black funeral here that feel very much like going to a Black funeral at home. And so it's not just as source, but sort of what are the sort of continuances and sort of, you know, what is happening, that call and response with Black funerary practices, because premature Black death is something that's global.
That's right.
For example,
Yeah.
and how does this interplay with those kind of global practices around the fact that we're not sure whether my brother's going to make it past 40, for example. I think that's a common experience to Black people globally. So just so the question being, in your carving out what is distinctive about African American Black elegy, for example, then to what extent is that in conversation with and drawing on other Black funerary practices in the wake of this disaster?
That's a really good question, because while I want to be meditating constantly on the interconnectedness of the Black diaspora, right, writ large. So this is not a project that is exclusively about the United States. It's a Black diaspora project, but I haven't figured out exactly when, where, why. The consistency for me is, African relationships or relationships that are drawn from African notions of a relationship with the dead that is not separate, that is not separated, that is not removed. So even though I kind of horrify my students by telling them that I have a ghost in my house. And I'm not concerned because, one, the ghost doesn't pay any bills, and two, I just kind of like wait it out, right? So if I hear something, I'm like, well, let me just wait, and then I wait, right? I feel like that's something that, when I say that I horrify my students, I mean they're really concerned for me, because they think there's a spirit in my house. And I'm just like, well, my relationship with the dead doesn't look like what you're imagining, right? I don't think I'm not being haunted currently. Also, I'm just like, houses have ghosts, I don't know. And that's my relationship that is separate and removed from the way that they look at or think about death. So when I think about door of no return, when I think about plantation sites throughout the diaspora, whether or not they are still plantation sites. Anywhere the ocean takes Black people is a concern of mine for this project. Now I just have to figure out geographically, culturally, structurally, and then thinking about the genre, the text, the texture of the text, and where it comes from, how I'm stitching all of that together. Haven't exactly worked that all out yet, but I do think that sound is going to be the largest chapter in this book. And I'm still working out, what that means, because I'm constantly asking myself the question, is this yours? Did it come from a great-grandmother across the water? What are you holding and why? And that'll be like a question that I'm asking for the book project, or trying to figure out.
No, after.
Thank you for an amazing talk, which is a work of art and a performance in and of itself. That was immense. This is, I guess, a question about the lexicon of key words that are playing in your head through this book project. Because when you set up that tension with ashes and the film poster and the still image versus the moving image, a term that occurred to me for a lot of the artworks that you showed us was ecstasy. And thinking about the standing aside and removal, and I thought of Baldwin's famous passage in The Fire Next Time, where he describes the ecstasy of the Black church service and its dangers, but how nothing has ever come close to that sense of love and abandonment and everything all rolled up at the same time. So I was thinking, in response to your talk about these still images, that evoke in us that sense of taking us to another place, a kind of ecstasy of grief, of love, of the complexity of Black life and loss. But then you complicated it for us with your refrain of how do you keep going. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the movement and stillness and whether ecstasy is useful.
Yes, that is really useful. I think I've been struggling with how to encapsulate so much grief, so much longing, so much loss across so many geographies and time periods, even though I'm keeping to a very contemporary moment. Ecstasy, hadn't thought about that, but yes. So I think part of what I want to explore is not just like the limit of representation, but then what exceeds the frame, which is why I'm still interested in a still image and why sound freaks me out so much, even though I know I have to move through it. I just don't know quite how to contain it. And of course, that's probably not the point, right? So to contain it. So I think I want to, like I haven't figured out during the break that we had, where none of my Hutchins Center fellows sent me a holiday card. And I came back, I was like, it's been 6 weeks. Nobody sent me a text saying Merry Christmas or anything. So I went on a kind of a plantation tour in the South. And I don't know how to, it is a part of Black Elegies. I was given a grant to go make this trip. I don't know how I'm going to include this except to say, I have no idea how Black people have survived. Like, I don't know where to begin and where to end. And the excess that is bounded within ecstasy might be one of the ways that I can have that conversation. Yeah, still thinking about it. I really don't know.
You referred to the relationship of Black people to the ocean.
Yeah.
In a passive voice.
Yeah.
That the ocean is something done to us, that has been done to our ancestors, right?
Yeah.
But there's a whole other side of that with
Right.
when Black people have a very active engagement with water.
Yeah.
Riverine peoples in Nigeria. You know, I was 20, I hitchhiked with a white guy across the equator, right? And it ended with sailing down the Congo River.
Yeah.
And all these people along the village, you know, make their livings swimming out and hustling people on the boat and, and all that. And remember when Mansa Musa makes his famous pilgrimage to Mecca, he's in Egypt, I think Alexandria, but I don't know, it could have been Cairo, I can't remember. And he's being interviewed by an encyclopedist who writes this down. And Mansa Musa says, you know, really, I'm not even the right, I'm just a number 2 guy. The real guy is busy discovering America. Now, obviously, he couldn't say that in 1324. But the real, yes, Abu Bakr, that he had decided that there was land across what we call the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
And he made 2 efforts. I mean, he took a bunch of canoes and stuff out, and then they came back. Then he went out again, and then we never heard from him again. I like to think they, you know, got here already, but I don't think they both. And then the Swahili coast, and this very much looks like a Swahili coast image, which I know it's not, but all kind of people making their livings on the Swahili coast, and I'm sure it's everywhere. I mean, where there was water, people swam and fished and did it. I would just advise you that it worked 2 ways. It wasn't only that African elites captured other Africans, sold them to white people on the coast, and they ended up in the New World. It was that people had a proactive, positive relationship to water as well. So it's something to think about.
Yeah, because that's, the water part is definitely my apprehension around water. It is not what I'm seeing. This is why I'm mesmerized by ashes. This is the only image that's, you know, in my study, the poster. Sometimes I just look at it when I want to be soothed. So I am working around my hesitation around, you know, the ocean, the sea.
Come down to Martha's Vineyard this summer.
Is that an invitation? Because I have that on video.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's invited.
Come to Martha's Vineyard.
Everybody's invited to stay at Barack's house. Barack got a big house.
Can't wait. Because I'm going to go knock on the door and tell him that you sent me.
Thank you. But you know my point. It's just to think about it both ways.
Yeah.
I love the water.
Thank you.
But I
me
grew
too.
up on the Potomac River where we went, you know, we were in the water every day in the summer.
Well, there it is.
We fished, we did swam, we did everything, you know.
I grew up where they said, if you go into the Hudson River, you'll come out an alien.
Yeah.
So I didn't go.
Yeah. Well, but this is true for the Black boys in my family. My Black female cousins who straightened their hair had no relationship to the water.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, they would go in bathing suits and hang out, but they would never get in the water because it was too expensive to have to do their hair all over again.
Too much. Yeah.
Also
which is
baptism and rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
African religion.
Yes.
what'd you say?
Baptism and
baptism.
also African religions of like immersion,
Rebirth.
Yeah.
which is rebirth.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Kimberly, for your presentation and, as someone just said, your exquisite performance. 'Cause I had a difficult time putting into words what I was witnessing. Two questions for you. If you were to list them, I was wondering if you could summarize the qualities that distinguish the elegy in Black art across music and the other genres you discuss. And my second question is, I'm wondering what drew you to this project? Like, what were the initial sparks that lit the fire?
Oh, awesome. Thanks, Mandy. So I'm going to start with the second question, and that is that I figured out a couple of years ago that while I was writing this book about the relationship between photography and anti-Blackness, it had so much grief in it that I had to pull it out. And I realized it was an entirely separate project. The problem was, mortuarium has been like excruciating to write. Like, it's really a lot of photographs of Black death. And I'm kind of asking the question, why do people keep presenting Black people as dead? As evidence, as information, as whatever. So Black Elegies came out of this project because I wanted to stay with a kind of the hard images for mortuarium. And then I needed somewhere else to go. Everything that I'm looking at in Black Elegies, everything is hard, but not painful. Like, I could watch that video and have multiple times. As a matter of fact, when I saw it the first time, I sat for 3 iterations on one side and didn't even go to the other side until I was done with that repetition. So these are works of art that I can write about without being so devastated by what they're aiming to cover. And then for the first question, the qualities. So I saw Black Mary. I knew I wanted to teach it. Didn't quite know what I thought about it. I have seen it 862 times now, so I know what I think about it, but I started teaching it. It's a perfect 5.5 minutes that students can really dig into, that they pull out so much. They know it's a film, they know it's not a music video, so they know they have to attend to it in a particular way, and that really helped. So I would say it's an example of something that doesn't cleanly state Black Mary is a patron saint of murdered Black people by police violence. Doesn't say any of that. But embedded in that film is everything that I want to discuss for this project, and I just needed like the one thing that did that work. And there is one photographic image. I decided not to show it to you because I'm presenting it at CAA on Friday, but the image is called For Men. It's by Roy de Carava. I am obsessed with Roy de Carava, but I am...
Obsessed with what?
Roy de Carava.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm absolutely obsessed with 4 Men. 4 Men is just an image of 4 men coming out of a memorial service for the 4 girls killed in Birmingham in 1963. So the image is taking place a year later, 1964. De Carava only has one image. There is no before, there's no after, there's just that one photograph, and it's truly devastating. Like, I could spend the entire book on that one photograph.
Tell people who Roy is, most people don't know, and about the sweet fly paper of life.
Ah, yes, Roy de Carava, very important. So I say top 5 photographers in the world, not very well known as a popular photographer, mostly because he refused to be shown or exhibited anywhere that had like the word documentary in it. If you are looking at his images and you're saying, this is great, social documentary, Black people, Harlem, he's like, no. So you're not gonna get to see any of those images, which is why he's less famous than, say, Gordon Parks, right? A contemporary. So his thing is Black people are fine art. They are not documentary subjects. So in 1955, he and Langston Hughes collaborate on a book called The Sweet Fly Paper of Life. He provides the images, and Hughes provides the text another really important book that just got redistributed. You couldn't get it for a lot of years. It's an excellent piece of work. So, I'm following Di Carava because I know that his eye is very specific and precisely pointed. And I know that whether we're talking about jazz musicians or a lounge scene or a memorial service for 4 girls who were killed the previous year, the consistency is the same. And he kind of famously doesn't use exterior light, so whatever light is available. And he attends to the complexities of dark skin on film. And he's also my boyfriend.
And there you have it.
He's married and dead, but I said what I said.
Talk about elegies.
Right?
The reverse elegy.
Hi, good afternoon. I also want to say thank you for this. Seconding what he said over there, I also felt compelled to stand a little bit afterwards. I have a question. My name is Mansour, and I just have a question about just a more technical piece about just elegy and what that means. I know you said that sometimes you see pieces or see art and you determine that it is elegy.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about the host of art forms that come out of Black communities in responses to being in the carceral state and incarceration and folks being physically removed from them, but not necessarily dying. And I'm wondering whether you consider that to be elegy, that those art forms that come from, it's almost like a mourning or a loss, but not necessarily.
Yes, absolutely. So if we're gonna go, plain speak, then we'd say an elegy is a lament for the dead, but really, I'm much more interested in loss and how loss is imagined artistically across several different genres of representation. So it is not always about death. And I feel like one of the things that Black people are consistently mourning is either removal from the land or migration and movement that you had to make, but you're still kind of longing for that original place or for the home place, for the place that you call home. And I think, I feel like Toni Morrison is never not writing an elegy. Like each one of her novels is an elegy. And, Pecola doesn't die in The Bluest Eye, but that entire novel is about mourning the loss of what could have been for Claudia and for Frida. So that's how I try to think about it. Not necessarily death, but it's so heavily imbued with death because it is always an ever-presence. And the project that I'm writing with this project is about how easily other people have deployed Black death, even to mourn their own losses that have nothing to do with Black people. So I'm thinking about all of that. I don't know how I'm going to contain it, but that's what I'm thinking about.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, that was very wonderful. And for some of us, today is like a proper introduction to Black elegies. And my question is with regards to the evolution of Black elegies since the time that you were introduced to this genre. How has it evolved, and what do you see Black elegies' future potential in exploring the experiences of Black communities and Black people? And for me personally, I don't think we have a consensus understanding of what it means to be Black. Depending on who you asked, you would get a very different answer. So what does it mean to be Black in this society?
Wow. You're talking about America or just generally speaking?
Sorry?
Are you talking about in the United States or just generally? What does it mean?
Mostly in the United States, but also...
Very strict rules over here. Literally, one drop makes you Black. One drop. So, this is dependent upon how people are defining themselves, but also how they are defined in spaces that they don't necessarily control. So someone who says to themselves, I'm not Black, I am, and then is consistently told that they are in fact Black, is very different from someone who is saying, I am mourning the loss of this specific group of Black people. So for my purposes, I'm Instead of moving through Freud, I'm going to Du Bois, Souls of Black Folk, Elegy. And for me, it's an elegy not just because he's talking about his son who died at 18 months, but also because each section is opened with passages from sorrow songs, from slave spirituals. And that's so profoundly important to Du Bois that I think it not just anchors the text, but it guides you along and it tells you some of the import that he's trying to bring to bear. So that for me is an elegy. I don't know that it's read that way by others, but that's how I feel about it now. And so I'm following that framework. And then in order to get at the psychoanalytic, I think I'm gonna move through Spillers and Hartman, so Cydia Hartman and Hortense Spillers, to think about archives, to think about gender, to think about place, like where people physically are when they're considering what they have and what they have lost. So I'm not fixed necessarily. Like I feel like I'm committed to a series of texts, but they could move, like, honestly. Sometimes I see a commercial and I'm like, well, that's enough. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Leave it alone? So until I am narrowed down by my publishers, it'll be pretty expansive, I think, or I'll try to make it pretty expansive. I want it to be open, you know, like a...
Are you dealing with Cain? Cain is very much
just pulled Cain out of my shelf, and I was like, no, I remember this from graduate school, and there's something here, and I put it on my study.
He says it's a swan song for a passing way of life.
Yes, yeah, I love Cain, so probably. Although let me not say. I was gonna say I'm not gonna go that early in the 20th century, but I might. Who knows? I don't know. I'm doing soul, so who knows? Haven't decided. Plus, this will be my third book, so I really don't have to decide. Is that how it goes? That's right. Like, I don't have to.
Wait, what?
It's my third book, so I really don't have to, like.
Nail it all down.
Yeah, I could just be a little bit more.
You can do whatever you want.
I'm going to call it a meditation, which means I almost don't need evidence. Is what I'm going to do.
You can get away with a lot with the word of meditation.
I know, right? That's what I'm going for, some meditation on. Yeah.
Two more questions. Faith.
Hi, Faith. Thanks so much for your work and for showing us how text can breathe while you're giving the presentation. That was just glorious. So at the very beginning on the screen, there was a quotation from Teju Cole, and I couldn't, an obituary is for and a lament is for the and I couldn't get the last words because I was writing it down.
An obituary is for the public.
Public.
A lament is for the community.
For the community. So I'm thinking of distinctions like that, thank you. And I'm back to that question of if we keep going, I can't read my writing, what might there be to see, I think. Yes. So I'm thinking about how you're using that. For example, does a genre, does the answer to that question or the answer to that invitation fall along generic lines, along the lines of modalities? So for example, does a black and white photograph elicit a kind of response that, say, a poem might not, a lyric poem as opposed to some other kind of poetry? And I was thinking about, so I'm just thinking about what it means to keep going in different ways and in different moods, maybe. So at the moment when in Moonlight he's taking off in that car, it's post-carceral, it's all kinds of, it's a particular moment in his life. So I'm wondering if keeping going takes on different registers depending on genre or affect or whatever.
Yes, thank you for that, Faith, because I think part of, so, you know, I'll say, I started taking sound out of images that I was teaching, because when I was a postdoc, I was exploring like gender representations in Disney films, and the students were singing all the songs. So I took the music off. and they stopped singing. So I've been doing that, ever since, really to if I'm teaching, to have them focus and hone in on the images, while we're having that conversation. I have found that really useful for Moonlight, just the last 29 minutes. That's what we're talking about. Just turn off the sound and we just, go through it. Couldn't do it for Black Mary because it needs sound. Some things it doesn't work for. But what I'm looking for when I am looking for or think I see Black elegies are these representations that exceed the framework. So if I'm thinking about photography, then they're not contained within the body of the photograph. They move beyond. Sometimes a photograph does that, and sometimes you need another genre of representation in order to access the same thing. If I feel like I see it, then I see it. So I started by thinking about the Alvin Ailey dance that I think is an elegy is cry. Yes. And I kept coming back to Revelations somehow. Cry kept sending me back to Revelations, and I think cry is doing the thing that Black elegies needs to do. Revelations is exceeding the frame, and therefore it's another avenue of exploration for me. So again, this is another way of saying, I have no idea. I have not decided, except to say, if it feels like it, then I pursue it. And usually, if it feels like it and I pursue it, it's because it's exceeding a kind of frame.
But that's fair enough, as long as you have a definition.
So I'm going to write that down and say that you said that was fair enough. And that as long as I have a definition. Thank you.
For any of us, you just need an internal logic, a definition, a thing that connects these.
Okay.
You don't have to look up in the Princeton Encyclopedia of Poetry and Poetics what an elegy is. You can write your own definition.
I can write my own. I'm writing that down too. It's a quote.
Free the slaves, right? That's true for all of us as academics. We have to step on the other side.
Well, I will say that I'm fortunate, to be in a department that is, kind of split 50-50 between the creative writers and the lit crits. So it's a lot of coalescing and or layering that takes place that feels much more normal than it would in maybe other places.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah,
right?
one last question.
So I have a comment and a question. My comment is, you're a DJ.
Oh, DJ.
Because what you're saying is really resonated with me in relation to what songs we dig for, what songs that we actually like, and how we resonate that with our community. So
yes.
We can write that down too.
I'm gonna write that down too. Are you left-handed? Are you?
I'm not left-handed.
Okay, just checking.
But my question is in relation to your comment, where do they get it from? You mentioned that in relation to Alice Smith and her talking about her grieving in relation to her grandmother. Mm-hmm. And so it reminds me of my work, particularly in Tulsa, Oklahoma, working with direct descendants artists on a project. And my question is, do you believe it's just them wrestling with their grief, or do you feel like they're actually having a conversation with these individuals? And do you believe that's where it's coming from?
You mean me having a conversation or they having a conversation?
They having a conversation.
They're having a conversation. Yeah, I think, yes. So I think part of what I'm interested in is it feels like in media res, like in the middle of a conversation that you're entering. That's what this feels like to me. And that's what a lot of the texts feel like. You're being allowed to enter this space, but you have to tread lightly. One of the places that I went was to the lynching memorial in Montgomery and the Legacy Museum. Very well done, right? So they actually say, you come to this lynching memorial, it's so much to take in. And they say to you, you can take photographs, but tread lightly. Black people's trauma is here. I have never visited a space that said that and enforced it kind of aggressively. So I'm looking for those spaces where not just Black people speaking to other Black people, but enclosures that are created because Black people have something to talk to Black people about, and that is loss, right? So Tulsa would be a really good example of that as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.